Imagine driving late at night and stumbling upon a town that isn't on any map. The streets are empty, the windows dark, yet you feel hundreds of eyes watching you. Locals whisper of a place that appears only to the lost. Daytown where those who enter never return. Tonight, we're unraveling the terrifying mystery of the vanishing town. But remember, if you ever find yourself there, it may already be too late. It was close to midnight when Daniel Harper turned off the interstate. His eyes were heavy, his body aching after hours of driving through endless farmland. The sky above was moonless, a sheet of black with faint pinpricks of stars scattered across it. He had been heading toward his parents' house in Pennsylvania, taking a route he had driven countless times before. But tonight, something was different. The GPS on his phone flickered and then froze, the blue arrow stuck in place. He tapped the screen, cursed under his breath, and tried restarting it. Nothing worked. He should have been only 20 minutes away from the next gas station, but the silence of the road stretched on with no sign of life, no headlights behind him, no glow of towns ahead. Just emptiness. As he drove further, the two-lane road narrowed. The painted lines were cracked and faded, swallowed by weeds creeping up from the edges. His headlights cut through the dark, revealing a battered wooden sign leaning to one side. It read, "Welcome to Greywick." Daniel frowned. He had made this trip dozens of times. He knew the towns along the way, Milford, Lakehurst, Brenton, but he had never once heard of a place called Greywick. It wasn't on the map, and it sure as hell wasn't on his GPS. Still, the gas gauge was dipping close to empty, and the thought of sleeping in his car on some deserted stretch of highway wasn't appealing. He pressed on. The road curved, and soon the faint outline of buildings appeared. They looked old, frozen in another century. Gas lamps stood on the sidewalks, casting a weak orange glow, though Daniel couldn't see any wires or sources of power. The streets were empty, and the silence was heavy, so heavy it pressed against his chest. Daniel slowed to a crawl, his tires crunching over gravel. He passed a row of storefronts, a bakery with dusty windows, a barber shop with a striped pole faded to pink and white, and a hardware store that looked as though it hadn't opened in 50 years, yet everything was preserved. The glass was unbroken, the doors intact, as if time itself had stopped here. He rolled down his window. No sound. No crickets, no wind, no hum of electricity. Just the faint ticking of his engine. A shiver slid down his spine. At the center of town, he spotted a gas station, or at least, what looked like one. The sign above it read, "Caldwell's Fuel and Service," in peeling black letters. Relief washed over him. Maybe someone was still here. Maybe he could ask for directions. He pulled up beside the pump, got out, and froze. The air was colder here, not the natural chill of night, but something sharper, biting. His breath puffed out in small clouds. He glanced around. Every window of every building seemed to be watching him. The pump looked functional, though it was the old-fashioned kind, with a crank and a glass cylinder on top. He reached for the handle, but before he could touch it, a voice broke the silence. "You're not supposed to be here." Daniel spun around. An old man stood at the edge of the station, half hidden in the shadows. His clothes were simple worn trousers, suspenders, a shirt with rolled up sleeves. His face was pale, his eyes wide and unblinking. "Sorry," Daniel said quickly, forcing a laugh. "I didn't mean to trespass, I'm just running low on gas. Do you know the quickest way back to the interstate?" The old man didn't move closer, he just shook his head slowly. "You took the wrong turn?" Daniel's skin prickled. "Yeah, I figured that much. Can I just fill up and be on my way?" The man's gaze flicked to the pump, then back to Daniel. His lips moved, forming words that Daniel barely heard. "They don't like visitors." "Who?" Daniel asked. The man didn't answer. He stepped back, melting into the shadows until he was gone. The silence returned, heavier than before. Daniel's throat was dry. Every instinct screamed at him to get back in the car and leave. But the gas needle was on red, and he didn't know how far the next real town was. He forced himself to grab the pump handle. To his surprise, it worked. Gas trickled into his tank, slow but steady. As he waited, he glanced at the street beyond. A figure stood there. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the lamp. But then it moved. It was a woman dressed in a long, old-fashioned dress that brushed the ground. Her hair was loose, covering half her face. She didn't move closer, didn't speak. She just stood there, staring at him. Daniel's heart pounded. He turned his eyes away, but when he looked back, she was gone. The pump clicked off. Daniel shoved it back into place, jumped into his car, and started the engine. He pulled out of the station, his tires screeching on the gravel. The streets wound deeper into town. He should have been able to turn around and find the road back, but no matter which way he drove, the buildings kept repeating. The bakery, the barber shop, the hardware store. The same gas lamps, flickering in the same way. It was as if the town had folded in on itself, trapping him inside. Daniel gripped the wheel tighter. He told himself he was just tired, that his brain was playing tricks on him, but then he saw her again, the woman in the dress. Standing at the corner, watching, he pressed harder on the gas. The car shot forward, street after street, corner after corner, and with every turn she was there, sometimes closer, sometimes farther, always silent, always staring. Finally, the car sputtered. The gauge was back on empty, though he had just filled it. Daniel slammed his fist against the wheel. Come on, the engine died. The headlights flickered out. Darkness swallowed him. And then knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed through the night, though it wasn't from the car. It was from outside, from one of the buildings, from everywhere. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He looked through the windshield. Every window in Greywick now had a face pressed against the glass. Dozens of faces, staring, unblinking, silent, and then slowly, the doors of the buildings began to open. One by one, as if the whole town was waking up. Daniel's only thought was to run, but as he reached for the door handle, he realized something that made his blood run cold. The woman in the dress was no longer across the street. She was standing right beside his car. Her hand was already on the handle. The door clicked, and part one ends here. Daniel's heart hammered so violently he thought it might burst. His fingers clawed at the car door handle, pulling it shut with a loud slam. He fumbled for the lock, pressing it down, though deep inside he knew it wouldn't matter. The woman outside didn't flinch. She just stood there, her pale hand resting on the metal, her long dress swaying as though in a breeze that Daniel couldn't feel. Her face was partly hidden beneath strands of hair, but when she tilted her head ever so slightly, he caught a glimpse of her features. Her eyes weren't normal. They were too dark, too empty, like twin wells that swallowed the weak glow of the street lamps. Go away, Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. The woman leaned closer to the glass, her forehead pressing against it. For one horrifying second, he thought she would speak. But instead, her lips curled into the faintest smile. Then, without moving her mouth, the sound came. Knock, knock, knock. The noise echoed inside the car, as if the sound had been pulled from the walls of his skull. Daniel's vision blurred. He slammed his hand against the ignition, desperate. To his shock, the car roared back to life. He floored the accelerator. The tires screamed, spitting gravel, and the car shot forward into the night. He didn't look back, he couldn't, but he could still feel her. That presence lingering like a weight on his chest, watching even as he sped down the narrow streets. The buildings blurred past him, the bakery, the barber shop, the hardware store, again and again, until he wanted to scream. He tried turning corners, tried reversing, even swerving into alleys, but every road led him back to the same town square. Greywick wasn't letting him leave. The second time he returned to the gas station, the old man was waiting. He stood in the same spot, his hands clasped in front of him, eyes shining with something between pity and warning. "You shouldn't fight it," the old man called out, his voice carrying clearly through the night. Daniel slammed the brakes, the car screeching to a halt. He rolled the window down halfway, glaring out. "What the hell's this place? How do I get out?" The man's expression didn't change. "You don't. That's not an answer," Daniel shouted. "I just need to get back to the highway. Tell me which way to go." The old man took a step closer, his face coming into the weak halo of the gas lamp. His skin looked waxy, stretched too tightly over bone, and when he spoke, his lips barely moved. "Greywick doesn't let go. Not once you've entered." Daniel's hands clenched the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. "That's insane. This is just some backwoods town. You can't keep people here." The man's gaze softened, but it wasn't comforting. It was sorrowful. "Do you think you're the first?" A chill swept over Daniel. He glanced toward the buildings again. The faces were still there, pale, unmoving, each pressed to a window, their eyes locked on him. Men, women, children, some in old-fashioned clothes, others in outfits that looked more recent. Dozens, maybe hundreds. "Who are they?" Daniel asked, his voice trembling. The man's eyes shifted toward the windows. "The ones who never left." Daniel felt his stomach twist. He remembered horror stories from his childhood tales of ghost towns, cursed places that swallowed travelers whole. But those were legends. They weren't supposed to be real. He shook his head violently. No, I'm not staying here. "I won't." The old man let out a long, weary sigh. "Then you should pray they haven't chosen you yet." Before Daniel could ask what that meant, the man stepped back into the shadows and vanished again, just as suddenly as before. And then the faces in the windows began to move. One by one, they disappeared from the glass. Not all at once, but in slow, deliberate motions. A child's face pulled away first, followed by a woman clutching her chest, then a tall, gaunt figure with sunken cheeks. Daniel's chest constricted. He gripped the wheel tighter. Then the sound came again. Knock, knock, knock. Not from the car this time, from everywhere. From every building, every door, every wall. The chorus of knocks rolled through the town like thunder. Daniel clamped his hands over his ears, but the sound wasn't just external, it was inside his head, reverberating through his bones. And then came the footsteps, dozens, maybe hundreds. They echoed against the cobblestone streets, slow and deliberate. The townspeople were coming out. Daniel's panic hit its peak. He slammed his accelerator and shot forward, the car fishtailing before finding traction. His headlights swept across the square, illuminating the first of them as they stepped into the street. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, as though their limbs didn't quite remember how to bend. Some stumbled forward in stiff, broken motions. Others dragged their feet, their heads snapping toward Daniel as if pulled by invisible strings. They weren't alive, at least not anymore. Daniel swerved, barely missing a figure that lunged from the side. His tires clipped another, sending it tumbling across the pavement with a sickening crack. But when he glanced in the rearview mirror, he saw the figure rising again, joints twisting back into place as though nothing had happened. He drove faster, desperate, but no matter how far he pushed, the crowd grew thicker. They spilled from alleyways, from houses, from the shadows themselves, filling the streets like an ocean of pale bodies. And then he saw her again, the woman in the dress. She stood directly in his path, her hair falling like a curtain across her face. Behind her, the crowd parted, leaving only her in the center of the road. Daniel's instincts screamed at him to stop, but another part of him, the part gripped by rage and terror, told him to plow through. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The car roared forward. But the instant his headlights hit her, she wasn't there anymore. Daniel jerked the wheel too late. The car swerved violently, tires screeching, and slammed against the side of a building. The airbag exploded, knocking the breath out of him. His vision swam as the world tilted. The engine hissed, smoke rising. Through the haze, Daniel blinked and realized he was no longer in the town square. The buildings around him were different now. The bakery and barber shop were gone. In their place stood rows of houses decaying, sagging under their own weight, but still intact. Their windows, however, weren't empty. Every single one had a face staring out. But these faces were closer than before. Daniel groaned, fumbling at the seatbelt. It wouldn't budge. The buckle was stuck. He glanced back at the windshield, and his heart stopped. They were outside the car now. The figures, the faces, the entire town. They pressed against the car, their hands smearing across the glass, their mouths opening in silent screams. Their eyes were black voids, endless pits of nothingness. Daniel clawed at the seatbelt until it finally gave way. He shoved the door open, stumbling out into the street. The crowd immediately shifted, their heads snapping toward him in unison. He ran. His legs pumped with raw desperation, carrying him through narrow alleys and broken fences. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to move, had to escape the suffocating presence that surrounded him. But no matter where he turned, the town shifted with him. Streets folded in on themselves, buildings rearranged, alleys twisted into dead ends. And at every corner, she was waiting. The woman in a dress. Her face hidden, her hands pale as bone, her presence stronger each time he saw her. Daniel's lungs burned, his vision blurred. He finally collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath, his sweat chilling instantly in the icy night air. The silence returned. No footsteps, no knocking, no whispers, just silence. And then, from the shadows, came a whisper. A voice softer than air, yet sharp enough to cut through his chest. "You're already one of us?" Daniel's head shot up, eyes wide. No, I'm not. I'm leaving. I don't belong here." The whisper turned into a laugh. A low, hollow sound that echoed all around him. And then, slowly, the faces began to reappear in the windows. But this time, one of them was his. Daniel stumbled backward, his breath ragged, his mind refusing to accept what he'd just seen. The reflection in the window, it had been him. His own face, pale and hollow, pressed against the glass alongside the others. For a moment, his eyes in the reflection had been different, lifeless, empty. "No," he whispered, shaking his head violently. "That's not me. That's not real." But even as he said it, the truth clawed at the back of his mind. Greywick wasn't just a town, it was a trap. And it wanted him. The silence pressed down heavier now, broken only by the sound of his shallow breathing. He backed away from the window, keeping his eyes locked on his distorted reflection until the street bent and the image disappeared. He didn't know where to go, but standing still felt worse than running blind. He darted down another alley, his footsteps echoing against the cracked cobblestones. The air was thick, clinging to his skin like a damp shroud. The deeper he ran, the more he noticed it. The town didn't feel abandoned anymore. It felt alive, like the buildings themselves were watching, like the very walls were leaning closer with every step he took. Then he heard it. Not the knocking this time, not the footsteps. A voice, clear, low, steady. "Don't let them mark you." Daniel spun, searching. His pulse throbbed in his ears. "Who's there?" From the shadows of a collapsed archway, a figure emerged. A man middle-aged, dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt that looked decades out of date. His face was haggard, but his eyes still held something Daniel hadn't seen in anyone else here. Life. "You're not one of them," Daniel breathed. "Not yet," the man replied grimly. He stepped closer, raising a finger to his lips. "Keep your voice down." "They're listening." Daniel swallowed hard, his throat dry. "What is this place? What's happening to me?" The man's expression tightened. "This is Greywick, a town that shouldn't exist. A town that feeds." Daniel shook his head, frustration boiling over. "That doesn't make sense. Towns don't feed. People do. What are they?" The man's voice dropped lower. "They were people once, but Greywick keeps them here, bound to its streets, its houses, its walls. The longer you're here, the more it takes. First your reflection changes, then your shadow. Then," he trailed off. "Then what?" Daniel demanded. The man's eyes locked onto his. "Then there's nothing left of you. You become one of them." Daniel's stomach twisted. His reflection, the window, the hollow eyes. He pressed a hand against his forehead. No, I'm not staying here. There has to be a way out. You're here. You're alive. You must know." The man hesitated, glancing around as though the buildings themselves were eavesdropping. Finally, he leaned in. "There are rules. If you follow them, you might survive long enough to find a way." Daniel's voice cracked. "Rules?" The man held up 3 fingers. "First, never answer the knock. No matter how many times you hear it, no matter how much it sounds like someone you know. If you open the door, they take you." Daniel shivered. He remembered the sound, echoing all around him. He remembered the woman's hand on his car door. The man lowered 1 finger. "Second, don't follow the lights, the lamps, the lanterns, sometimes even headlights. They lead you deeper, not out. Greywick wants you to think you're escaping, but every path takes you further in." Daniel thought of the roads looping endlessly, the town square repeating again and again. The man lowered another finger. "And third, never let them touch you. A hand, a face, even a brush of their clothes. That's the mark. Once you're marked, your reflection changes for good. And when the sun rises, if it ever does, you won't be you anymore." Daniel felt his knees weaken. "So what am I supposed to do? Just keep running? Until what? Until I starve?" The man's expression hardened. "Until you find the heart?" "The heart?" He nodded. "Every trap has a center. Greywick's no different. Somewhere in this town is the reason it exists. A grave, a house, an object, known sure. But if you find it, and if you destroy it," his voice faltered. "Maybe then you can leave." Daniel's chest heaved. "Has anyone done it?" The man's silence was answer enough. Before Daniel could press further, a sound ripped through the air. Knock, knock, knock. Not close, not on a door. From above, both men froze. Daniel tilted his head back slowly, dreading what he'd see. Every rooftop was lined with figures. Dozens of them, standing motionless, staring down with black, hollow eyes. Their pale faces glowed faintly in the lamplight, their mouths open in soundless screams. The man grabbed Daniel's arm. "Run." They bolted together, weaving through alleys as the sound of the knocking grew louder, faster, closer. The figures began to descend, dropping from rooftops with unnatural grace, landing on their hands and feet like broken marionettes before scrambling forward. Daniel's lungs burned, his legs screaming in protest, but adrenaline pushed him on. The man led the way, ducking into a crumbling house with shattered windows. They slammed the door shut, pressing their backs against it as the echo of footsteps swarmed outside. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and mold. Faint moonlight filtered through cracks in the roof, illuminating a staircase leading upward. The man finally spoke, his voice sharp and urgent. "This house is safe. For now." Daniel collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. His hands trembled, his mind reeling. "Safe from those things out there?" The man crouched beside him. "Not from them, from her." Daniel stiffened. "Her?" The man's eyes darkened. "The woman you've seen. Long dress, hair over her face. She's not like the others. She's the one who marks you, the one who decides who stays. Daniel's pulse spiked. He remembered her hand on his car door, her whisper in his mind. "What does she want?" he whispered. The man's answer was simple. "You." The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel's thoughts spiraled, his body shaking. The faces in the windows, the rules, the endless streets, all of it circled back to her. "She's the heart, isn't she?" Daniel asked suddenly. "That's why she's everywhere. That's why I can't leave." The man didn't answer at first. Finally, he nodded once. Maybe. Or maybe she's just the guardian. Either way, if you don't stop her, she'll take you. Daniel clenched his fists, forcing strength back into his voice. "Then tell me how. How do I stop her?" The man's eyes glistened, reflecting the faint light from the cracked ceiling. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "You don't." The words sank into Daniel like ice water. His chest tightened, his mind screaming at him to deny it. But deep inside, he felt the truth of it. The man leaned closer, his expression grave. "Survival isn't about beating Greywick. It's about lasting one more night. One more hour, one more breath. That's all any of us can do." Daniel shook his head violently. "No, I'm not living like that. I'm not becoming one of them." The man's lips trembled, as though he wanted to argue, but then his eyes flicked upward. Daniel followed his gaze. At the top of the staircase, half hidden in the shadows, stood the woman. Her dress hung in tatters, brushing the floor. Her hair obscured her face, but her pale hand rested on the banister, long fingers curling around the wood. Daniel's blood froze. The man's face twisted in horror. "She found us." The knocking began again. This time, it wasn't outside. It was inside the walls. Knock, knock, knock. The house trembled with the sound, dust falling from the ceiling like ash. And the woman began to descend the stairs, step by step by step. The creaking of the staircase filled the silence, each step heavy and deliberate, as though the woman wasn't moving with her own will, but with the weight of the town itself. Dust rained from the ceiling, drifting through the fractured moonlight, settling like pale ash on Daniel's shoulders. His breath caught in his throat. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his body refused to move. It was as if the very air thickened around him, holding him in place, forcing him to watch as the figure descended. The man beside him, the one who had warned him, pressed his back against the door, his hands trembling. "Don't look at her face," he hissed, his voice sharp with terror. But Daniel's eyes, unwilling and unblinking, were already fixed on her. The woman's hair, long and matted, swayed with each step, partially veiling her face. Her dress was soaked with stains, dark patches spreading like ink on paper. Her movements were agonizingly slow, yet inevitable, like a pendulum swinging closer and closer. Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. "Who is she?" he whispered. The man's reply was nearly drowned by the pounding in the walls. "She's the first, the one who never left. The one who built Greywick." Daniel's stomach lurched. "What do you mean?" The man swallowed hard. "Long ago, before this place was swallowed, she lived here. They say she made a bargain. Protection for the town in exchange for something. But bargains with shadows never end the way you want them to. Greywick didn't survive, it was devoured. And she became its keeper." Daniel shook his head, disbelief surging. "You're saying she created this?" The man's voice cracked. "She is this." The knocking inside the walls grew louder, faster. Each impact rattled the floorboards, as if invisible fists were trying to break through. The woman stopped halfway down the stairs. Slowly, her head tilted upward, and for the first time, her face became visible through the curtain of hair. Daniel's breath hitched. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched tight over bones that looked too sharp, too fragile. Her eyes dark voids, deeper than the night sky locked onto his. They weren't eyes that saw. They were eyes that claimed. The man beside him whispered urgently, "Don't move. Don't speak. Don't too late." The woman raised her hand, pointing directly at Daniel. The walls groaned, the knocking synchronized with the beat of his own heart. Thud, thud. A voice, soft but endless, filled the room. It wasn't spoken aloud, but poured into his skull, rattling his thoughts like dry leaves. "You don't belong here." Daniel staggered back, clutching his head, his vision swimming. "Get out of my mind," he gasped. The man lunged, grabbing Daniel's arm. "Don't answer her. Don't give her your voice." But it was already too late. The woman's lips curled into a faint smile, as though she'd won something unseen. She began moving again, her steps faster now, each one making the house shake. Daniel's panic surged. He tore free from the man's grasp and stumbled toward the back of the room, searching desperately for another exit. His hands scraped against peeling wallpaper, dust clogging his throat. "There's no way out," the man cried. "She's already marked you," Daniel spun, rage and terror colliding. "Then tell me how to stop her." The man's eyes glistened with despair. "You can't stop her. You can only replace her." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. His stomach twisted, his throat closing around the question he didn't want to ask. "Replace her?" The man's voice dropped, trembling. "Greywick needs a keeper. That's the only way it survives. One soul to bind it, one soul to hold the door shut. That's how she's kept it alive all these years. If you don't want to be claimed, you must take her place." Daniel's blood froze. His body screamed to deny it, to refuse, but something deep inside whispered the truth. This was the bargain, the only bargain. The woman was only a few steps from the bottom now. Her bare feet touched the floorboards with sickening cracks, as though her bones broke and healed with every step. Her voice filled his head again. 3 nights, or forever. Daniel's vision blurred, his chest heaving. "No," he roared. "I won't be your prisoner." The walls shook violently, the knocking escalating into a deafening roar. The wallpaper split, revealing dark hands pressing outward from inside the walls, clawing, reaching. The man shouted over the chaos. "You must find the heart. Before she takes you, find the heart and destroy it." But Daniel's mind was unraveling. The woman's presence pressed on him like a vice, crushing his will, searing his thoughts with whispers of surrender. Suddenly, she lunged. Her hand shot forward, her fingers stretching far longer than they should, pale and clawed. They wrapped around Daniel's wrist, cold as stone, burning as though they branded his skin. Pain shot up his arm. His knees buckled. He screamed, thrashing, trying to pull free. The man leapt forward, striking her arm with a rusted piece of wood, but it splintered uselessly. Her grip didn't falter. Instead, her other hand rose, brushing aside her hair, revealing her full face. It was death. It was hunger. It was eternity. The moment her eyes locked onto his, Daniel felt it, the mark searing into him. His reflection, his shadow, his very self claimed. "No," he bellowed, with the last shred of strength he had. He drove his fist into the wall, breaking through the rotted plaster. His hand closed around something cold, something pulsing. A heart, not flesh, but stone. Black and slick, beating in rhythm with the knocking. The man's eyes widened. "You found it. Destroy it." The woman shrieked, her grip tightening, her scream splitting the air into shards. Daniel summoned every ounce of fury, every ounce of desperation, and slammed the heart against the floor. Crack. The walls buckled. The floor lurched. The town itself roared. Again, he struck it. Crack. The knocking faltered, the hands retreating. The woman's grip weakened. One final time, he lifted it high and smashed it with all his might. Shatter. The heart split into fragments, black dust exploding outward. The woman's scream tore through the house, shaking the very foundation. Her body convulsed, crumbling into ash, her form collapsing into nothingness as the air was sucked out of the room. And then silence. Greywick held its breath. Daniel staggered, collapsing to the floor, his chest heaving. The man rushed forward, grabbing his shoulders. "You did it," he breathed. "You broke the heart. You destroyed her." But even as he spoke, the ground trembled again, not with rage, with hunger. The shadows thickened, swirling around them, crawling up the walls, wrapping around Daniel's legs. The town itself was closing in. The man's eyes went wide with terror. No, you don't understand. Without her, there's nothing to bind it. The town doesn't vanish, it consumes. Daniel screamed as the darkness coiled tighter, pulling him downward. The man's voice grew distant, swallowed by the roar of collapsing walls. Greywick will always need a keeper. And then everything went black. Darkness. It wasn't the kind of dark you find when you close your eyes, or even the suffocating black of a room without windows. This was different. This was the absence of light, of warmth, of time. Daniel floated in it, weightless, voiceless, thought unraveling like threads in an endless void. At first, he thought he was dead, but then the whispers returned. They were faint at the edges of his mind, brushing against him like moth wings. 1,000 voices, speaking at once, though none of them carried words he understood. They weren't speaking to him, they were speaking through him. Daniel tried to scream, but no sound came. His body was gone, yet he felt everything. The thrum of the earth, the groan of old wood, the cold hunger of the shadows. He was no longer himself. He was part of Greywick, and Greywick had claimed him. When Daniel opened his eyes again, he was lying on the main street. The cobblestones stretched endlessly, glowing faintly with a pale, unnatural light. The town looked different, now sharper, more vivid, as though every detail was painted in with dreadful precision. But it wasn't empty anymore. Figures moved in the mist. People, hundreds of them, wandering the streets, their faces pale and lifeless, their eyes hollow. Their movements were jerky, puppet-like, as though strings dragged them forward. Daniel staggered to his feet, panic surging. "Hello?" he called, his voice hoarse. "Who are you?" One of the figures turned. It was a woman, her mouth stitched shut with black thread, her eyes wide and wet. She raised a trembling hand, pointing directly at him, and then all the others stopped. One by one, every hollow figure in the town turned toward Daniel, their eyes locking onto him. A silence fell, heavier than before. And in perfect unison, their mouths opened not with flesh, but with sound. "You are the keeper." The words shook the air, rattled the stones beneath his feet. Daniel staggered back, his heart pounding. "No, I destroyed the heart. I broke the curse." The figures stepped closer, their whispers weaving together into a chant. "The heart is not gone. The heart is you." Daniel clutched his chest, his skin burning. Beneath his ribs, he felt it, the thrum, steady and relentless. The blackstone heart was gone, but its rhythm lived inside him. His veins burned, his pulse foreign. His own body had become the anchor. "No," he whispered. "No, this can't be happening." From behind the crowd, a voice broke through. The man, the one who had guided him, pushed forward. His face stood with sorrow. "I warned you," he said softly. "Greywick doesn't let go. Without the heart, it needed another vessel. And you gave it yours." Daniel shook his head violently. "No, I won't do this. I won't keep this place alive." The man's expression was grim. "You don't have a choice." The shadows surged upward, wrapping around Daniel's legs, pulling him toward the center of the street. The figures circled him, their chant growing louder, vibrating in his skull. "Keeper, keeper, keeper." Daniel screamed, thrashing, but the more he struggled, the tighter the shadows clung. His reflection wavered in their darkness, twisting, reshaping, his eyes, once blue, now black voids. His mouth opened, and though he didn't will it, the words spilled out. "You don't belong here." The same words the woman had spoken. Daniel fell to his knees, horror tearing through him as realization struck. He wasn't replacing her, he was becoming her. The townspeople bent low, bowing to him, their stitched mouths parting into gaping smiles. The mist thickened, curling around him like chains, rooting him deeper into the stones. Daniel screamed again, but the sound worked, no longer his own. It was deeper, older, echoing through the entire town. His voice had been absorbed, transformed, given back to the place. The last fragments of his humanity crumbled. His memories blurred his home, his family, his life before Greywick, all dissolving into the void. All that remained was the hunger, the duty, the endless cycle. And then silence. When the mist cleared, Daniel was gone. In his place, at the edge of the old staircase in the inn, stood a figure, a woman, her hair draped across her face, her dress dark and stained, her eyes endless voids. She stood motionless, waiting, watching. The keeper had returned. Outside the borders of Greywick, far beyond the mist, the world moved on. Travelers passed the roads nearby, never noticing the fork that wasn't supposed to exist. But sometimes, just sometimes, those who took a wrong turn found themselves standing before the gates of a town not marked on any map. And when they wandered in, curious and unafraid, they heard it. The knocking in the walls, the whispers in the shadows. And if they stayed long enough, they saw her standing at the top of the staircase, waiting with hollow eyes. Some ran, some never left. Then some, like Daniel, became part of Greywick forever, because the town always needed a keeper, and the town always found one.